today, if you're ready, I had mentioned we were going to talk about something else, but I ended up, when I looked at my lesson plans, the actual subject for today is some case studies of some loans that we went through. So it should be more enjoyable, not so intense, kind of brainiac-y kind of stuff, just a little more fun to just kind of go through a case study and kind of listen to what's a good deal, what's a bad deal, kind of review that, kind of practice that a little bit so that we're more comfortable looking at properties. Are you looking at properties, by the way? Are you in in your daily activities or weekly? Do you look at Zillow, or do you look when you're driving down the road? Do you involve yourself in that?
Uh, Not within my neighborhood or community, but yeah, online I do a lot.
Take a look a lot. And what are you looking for in particular?
Um, I was before I started this class. I actually wanted to buy some more mortgage notes. So I was looking at
Mhm.
some other performing and non-performing loans that I could possibly purchase, and
Mhm.
that's why I actually found this meetup.
Discussion. Yeah, let's meet up.
Because I was looking to continue to purchase more, not knowing how long this process was going to take. I thought
Mhm.
it would kind of finalize by now and then be able to get into the next one. So
Yeah.
I was looking at it. That was why I even joined this class. So I was more looking at um, other mortgage notes, either performing or non-performing. Didn't know if I wanted to do another non-performing foreclosures since this one was just such a headache.
Yeah.
But I'm on one hand, I feel not discouraged, but it's really frustrating, this whole foreclosure process. So in one hand, I feel a little bit discouraged, but on the other hand, I'm learning so much that I kind of feel like I have a lot more knowledge to tackle something like this again if I needed to. So it's just a little bit exhausting and frustrating when you're dealing with a very
Yeah.
manipulative borrower.
Would you say that just common sense would say that buying a non-performing note, or buying a note in general that's already been originated, there's some, maybe some more inherent risk in that than where you see one originated from the very beginning?
Um, yeah, I do. Um, but at the same time, I'm not really sure how I would be able to originate a note. So I'm just trying to learn more.
Sure. So the origination process, you can, as a private individual, do it. But we've discussed. I remember mentioning to you initially. You want to use a broker so that you get the paperwork right, so that everything's done within the spectrum of the law of the state that you're working in. And then oftentimes, because they take so much of the responsibility off your shoulders, I find the investors go, you know what, this is passive. I like it. You tell me what's going on, and they it's a little more relaxing. It's kind of like somebody's got your back the whole way, or you're a team, more kind of a thing. So it's a little different in that regard. But you can originate them on your own. I think the maximum is 5 or 8. I can't remember what it was per non-licensed people, but you get to a certain point, and you're going to have your broker's license involved to do the next one each year. So depending on how much you're lending out, you know, and what you get asked to make loans on, you could do it on your own. So you could research that, and some of the things we're talking about, like last week when I went through the civil code sections, and that particular section will give you a lot of information on what's legal. As far as what steps you have to take, that's a whole nother lesson, or a whole nother, how do you originate, what kind of documentation has to be provided, Do I do a truth in lending? Do I do a real estate settlement procedures act form? Which forms do I use? There's a whole bunch of forms to do if you're using doing for a consumer, and a different set for business type loans that are secured by real estate. So a lot to study in that area. If you're interested in doing that, though, certainly something you can learn. It's not, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out. Real estate's kind of, you know, you don't have to have a super high education, and you can see that, over the years I've seen that where the person who's a good salesman or salesperson, they're very successful in real estate and not necessarily have, a college degree or anything like that, but the ability to be likable and understand what people's needs are and give that to them, you can do pretty good with it. So it's not much of it is really high end stuff until you start getting into the big dollar stuff and you start working towards like high rises and things like that. It gets a little bit deeper. But again, that has to do more at that point. There's a lot more accounting going on, a lot more of that kind of stuff. So today I wanted to do basically. Do you have any more questions about that before I move on? So today I wanted to discuss. Last time I think we went over the legal aspects. So today I wanted to do some examples, and our goal today is to identify the key factors that contribute to the success of deals, understand the challenges we're facing and how to overcome them, extract actionable strategies that you can apply in your own investments, and we'll walk through those case studies and present you with some numbers here and see how that goes. So, you ready for number one? Drum roll.
Am I supposed to be looking at something or?
I'm just reading. This is just going to be a conversation. I've got my notes here, so there's no real. If you want to pencil it out, I guess you could. But the deal overview. I mean, we went through this process before. So the deal overview was, in this case, we're going to do the first case study is a single family home in a growing suburb in Sacramento. The borrower is an experienced real estate investor specializing in flips. The loan has been provided by Trustone Capital. The collection of the payments and loan management is being handled by a professional servicing company. The loan terms were $200,000 at 10% interest for 12 months, and the position of the deed was in first position. So the success factors for this kind of a deal is the borrower had a solid history of successful flips, demonstrated good financial health, and provided a detailed renovation plan. So we researched the property for value, and we used both an independent appraiser and a comparative market analysis to validate the property's value. Now, a lot of the hard money guys or private lenders, they will make their own judgment on value. They won't charge for an appraisal. That would mean to me that you know that market well enough if you're going to make that decision. Let's say you decide to do some private deal on your own. You're not going to use a broker. You need to be confident that you can assess the value of what that property is worth. And we learned earlier that the reason we want to do that is because the collateral, we have to make sure that we have lots of collateral in case something goes wrong. So if you don't get the value right and you make too high of a loan, it could cause you to lose some of your investment. So that's really important to me, to teach yourself how to value properties. And in this case, they used a comparative market analysis, which you and I have discussed is the standard method for single family homes. We've discussed that commercial properties are done differently, and we'll get to that a little later today. The other thing that was interesting on this property, this is a success factor, was the suburb showed a strong demand for renovated homes and it contributing to a quick sale. So one of the things that you can do to find that information is, if you're not a member of the multiple listing service, you can certainly go sit down with a realtor and start looking that up. I do believe in many areas there's access to the MLS service without being a realtor. And so you can research. Have you done any research like that, of trying to find out um, how many houses sold? You know, what was the purpose of the sale? How many of them were fix and flips? How many, you kind of get into the nuts and bolts of all the sales in a particular neighborhood. So that information is available out there. You have to dig for it, but that would be something that you would do to make sure that you have a successful investment. Is, if the exit plan is to fix it and flip it, is it a neighborhood that fix and flipped homes sell quickly? Just a common sense question. And so you can do that research. The next section is performance and returns. So the borrower actually completed the renovations ahead of schedule on this deal. The property sold within 6 months, allowing the lender to receive full repayment and their interest a little earlier than expected. Now, you and I talked about that. Let's say the flipper wants to borrow the money for 12 months. They flip it and they're ready to pay it off in 3 months. That's a little earlier than you expected, so you're not going to earn a full 12 months interest. So what did I suggest? Do you remember?
They paid it off early? I don't
If
remember.
they paid it off early. So what I suggested was that we put a prepayment penalty in the note that allows us to earn 6 months interest if they pay it earlier than the due date at a minimum. So in 3 months, we wouldn't have earned our minimum, but we would have had a prepayment penalty in that would have cost them an additional 3 months interest for that loan. So that goes to the investor to get their interest. So your broker will protect you that way, or now that you know, you'll want to put that in your note, which we did talk about that a little bit last week and some other times too. So that's something that's really handy. Let's see here, the performance under the property sold within 6 months. We got full payment and we got interest earlier, as expected, earlier than expected. The investment achieved a 10% annualized return with minimal risk exposure due to the low loan to value. What did we have as an LTV? It looks like it was 60%. I didn't read that part. So we loaned them 200,000. It was worth 330, and we were at 60% loan to value. So the lesson that we learned through this particular deal, so it's a successful deal, was that it was critical to vet the borrower and verify the property's value to protect our investment. So the short loan terms matched the project scope. So a flip, we did 12-month term, and that aligned well with the borrower's planned renovation and sale timeline. And that reduces the potential market risk. The other thing that was good in this deal was that the POM, the servicing company, did regular updates to the investor. In fact, they report to you every month. and along with your check get deposited directly into your bank account. You receive a report. They also are in connection with the borrower, and they should anything arise, they inform you right away about any potential issues.
So
That's
when they're reporting, what exactly are they reporting to you as the investor?
Yeah, yeah. They report the payment was on time, how it was paid, when it was deposited into your account, you know, those kinds of things, the balance that's on the note. And then if there's any kind of interaction with the borrower, you're going to get a report about that. We spoke to them about this, let's say a borrower became, their due date was the 5th, and on the 6th, they're calling them and asking them. They're going to have to tell you because you're looking for a deposit in your account and you haven't been paid yet. So you get that kind of information. Generally, if they're right on top of it, which PLM is really good at that, they will have a conversation with the borrower right away and figure out what the plan is or what they're doing or whether they're not cooperating. And then they're going to communicate that to you. And as the beneficiary, they're the trustee. And you remember those roles. So the beneficiary, you're in control. It's your note. You benefit, or the beneficiary of the interest, and you control what happens. The trustee is your person who works for you and does what you ask them to do as far as collect or you know file foreclosure, whatever the process is. And this is California. It's different in other states. A lot of them use the same system, but there are some that are different. So that's communicated to you. You're going to have a conversation about that, and you're going to make some decisions on what you want your trustee to do because you're in charge as the beneficiary. It's your money that you put up, so you're driving the car basically. But they're going to communicate to you and handle all that for you, so you're not calling up and the borrower's, well, my tooth fell out and my kid swallowed it and then we had to wait for it to, just whatever their stories are. They handle all that for you, so you're not thinking about, it makes it just a lot easier. And then what we do is we charge the borrower for that. So it doesn't really come off, it's no skin off your nose. You get your 10% return in this deal. They're going to pay a 0.5% higher than your rate, and that service is then provided for you. It's the same way we do the title and escrow. The borrower pays the title fees, pays for an Alta coverage plan. The borrower pays if they don't keep insurance and you're forced insurance. The borrower pays all the closing costs. They pay it all. You can uh, offer to have it zero closing costs, but at the end of the day, the truth is the borrower pays for it all. Whoever's borrowing that money, it just gets packaged up a different way, whether it's in a white envelope or a black envelope. It's still they're paying it. So, and there are reasons why people may not want to have closing costs covered or have those as fees because the deal is so tight that they need to have they don't have enough extra cash to actually close the transaction. So there's sometimes where you will add um, yield spread premium to cover closing costs. Is how it's done. So then somebody else puts up the money for the closing costs, and then they collect that money back through interest payments. Does that make sense? Sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of. They still end up paying for it. It's whether they pay it in cash up front or in interest payments later. So for example, if it's $1,000 for the title fees, you can charge them an extra point in interest, and then you get paid an extra $100 a month in interest to cover those expenses, and it gets paid back to you. And then 2 months, you make a little extra. You make an extra $200, for the rest of it. Is a way to set it up. So different ways to do that. Let's move on to case study number 2. See if I can make the words a little bigger. I was squinting a whole bunch trying to read there. So this one's a commercial property, successful deal. The property was a small retail plaza with 4 units. Have you seen those little strip centers? Little 4-unit business things, like they're around. Maybe you've seen them with 10. 10's a pretty common size, 10 to 12.
Seems kind of small.
It is. There's, in the 50s and 60s, they built about that size. And there's still some of them around. Some of them gobbled up, rebuilt. This particular borrower sought funds to complete renovations and to attract new tenants. The loan was funded. PLM was the servicing company. The loan terms were $500,000 at 12% interest for an 18-month term, and it was a first trustee position. The loan to value was 55%, with the plaza being valued at $900,000. So borrowed $500,000, valued at $900,000. Now, that's pretty loud. Come here. I'm recording. All right, so that'll be fun to have on a recording. Here, come here. Come on. Hey, come over here. Look. Let me show you, Amanda, who your buddy is here.
Wow, he's pretty big.
Can you see him? He's massive. I'm trying to pull on him. It's just his head. And then this is desk height here, and his head's all above that. He's about 110 pounds. It's a big boy. And he's pretty protective. That's enough. Come over here. Come on. Come here. Settle down. All right. So we were talking about the loan to value ratio being 55%. And then we started into talking about that it's a little bit higher return, the 12% return on this because it's commercial property. And they typically offer a little higher return than a residential property. So you're going to see an offer of a higher rate. And we also go with a little bit lower loan to value, which was the 55. And we talked about commercial properties. That's standard. So when you're investing, you charge a little higher rate in interest and a little less loan to value. You want more skin in the game. So let's see here. We got 12% on this one. So some of the challenges that were faced during the process of this particular loan, even though it was successful, was midway through the loan term, one of the key retail tenants backed out, and that threatened the cash flow on the property. So you have 4 units, and one of the key units, which makes me think in this description that the units all 4 were not the same size. There might have been one a little bit bigger than the other, which would make them a key tenant. So they backed out, and we lost that income on the property. You and I talked about commercial properties being valued based on their income, and that was it. So that's how we derive value in commercial properties is income, and to be specific, net operating income is where the value comes from after expenses, but before mortgage and taxes. So in this case, what happened was the borrower, our borrower, shifted their focus and leased that key space out to a service-based company as opposed to a retail company. And by doing that, they were less affected by the retail market. So you realize, I'm sure you do, that service companies have less fluctuation based on, the retail stuff going on. You've seen stuff come and go, and prices are up and down, and people are buying more retail or less retail stuff. Retail, if it's not um, uh, the things that you need to live every day, you know, the retail sales, like if it's clothing, people can skip a dress or skip a pants slack or, a jacket, or, they can skip that if it's clothing. Or so a lot of the retail has a little bit more uh, variable, sales than some service businesses. So in this case, our borrower uh, shifted their focus to a service-based business and re-rented the space, and that effectively put that property back in even better position than when we made the loan originally. And so, as a lender, you're going to want to know if you're doing a commercial property like this one, what are the best tenants to have in there and why. And so, we just gave you an example of why a retail customer, as opposed to a service customer, could be a better tenant for your building. And some small businesses offer both a combination of retail and service. So, can you think of anything like that?
Hair salons?
What's that?
Hair salons, they usually sell product as
They
well.
sell product and they give a service.
Yeah.
Exactly. Um, Nail salons, hair pedicures. Um, what about uh, pet supplies or bicycle shop? Or those both have a pet supplies is probably going to be very low service because they might have veterinary service and maybe dog washing or grooming, where that wouldn't be very much. But a bicycle shop, most of a bicycle shop's income is in repairing bicycles. It's not in the sales of bicycles.
Mm.
So they have a retail front, but they also repair. How about plumbing store? You're going to fix your plumbing, but they're going to sell fixtures, some of that. You want to look for those kind of tenants to fill in those spaces for your commercial building, or at least have your borrower look for that. And maybe when you're interviewing them for the loan, you're kind of getting a feel for how they, oh, how do you rent? What are your decisions? How do you decide on which tenants to take? Where, you can ask questions about what they're thinking so that you have an understanding of if they have a problem, where they're going to head, in advance. And that's usually, something that I do. But if you do it on your own, you're going to want to kind of get an idea. That's kind of why you ask about their exit strategy. You ask about their plans. What are you going to do if something goes wrong? What would you do? Do you have a plan? Do you have what if that doesn't work? Do you have something else you might do? What are you thinking about? You know, just curious how long and then of course you can always, stroke them and say, wow, that's pretty clever, or, things that they come up with, and let them know that you appreciate hearing those ideas. Um, so that's kind of a neat thing. Let's talk about the performance and the returns on this one. So basically, the borrower successfully fulfilled the vacant units and really enhanced the property's value and stability by choosing a better fit tenant. So that's a good thing. And then the loan was repaid in full at maturity, and it delivered a 12% return to the investor. So that's a good commercial deal. Um, One of the takeaways from this is basically commercial properties offer higher rates of return, but they need a little bit closer monitoring. So um, the good news is if you got a good servicing company, they'll stay on top of those kinds of things and adapt quickly. Another key reason for the success of this particular deal was the borrower's adaptability to be able to select and provide a different kind of tenant that made the property value higher and um, made it more secure. And then thirdly, that regular communication helped manage the risks and takes care of things effectively. I think my voice is going away. So let's talk about the best practices um, for picking different types of notes to invest in or borrowers to loan to. So one of the first thing that kind of rule number one, do you remember what that was?
So picking the borrower?
Yeah, well, the first rule of making a note, or what is the most important thing that we've talked about? I'll help you out if that's okay.
The value?
What's that?
The value?
The value, exactly. The loan to value is the most important aspect of this kind of deal. Have you ever taken the time to figure out at 65% loan to value how many dollars a person puts up to borrow a dollar from you?
Say that one more time.
If I want to borrow a dollar from you, how many dollars in collateral do I put up to borrow that dollar? So we do 65% loan to value. So
Oh,
if
yeah.
we divide 100 into 65, it's $1.53.8. So for every dollar you loan me, I'm going to give you collateral of $1.53. And that to me is the clearest way to explain to somebody how secure investing in trust deeds is. I'm going to loan you a dollar, you're going to give me $1.53 collateral. If I don't pay you my dollar, you can keep my $1.53. That's what you're doing with this paperwork in this deal. And at the minimum. And that's why values are the most important item of the whole thing. If you get that value off and they're only giving you $1.10 for every dollar they borrow, that's risking your investment because you may need to, as you know, hire an attorney, go through a waiting period of not getting your interest, having to collect it later, other kinds of things. So that cushion of the 53 cents is there to help you mitigate any risks for the dollar that they borrowed. So, and it's even higher with the commercial.
65, 1.53.
1.538. Yeah, did you do the math?
On the calculator, yeah, right now.
Yeah, you tried it, right? And it's true. I'm not making it up. So that's one of the nicest things when you look at. So let's say, for example, if you go to the bank and the bank you put in a dollar, how much money do they guarantee that you get back if they lose your dollar?
What?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? So I take a dollar and I go down and put it in the savings account. Here, I put it in the savings account. The bank has FDIC coverage for my dollar. So the bank goes bankrupt. How much am I guaranteed to get back from the bank using FDIC insurance for my dollar I put in?
250,000?
No, you get $1.
Oh.
You get $1 back.
Okay.
So when you go to the bank and put in the savings account and you get your 0.5% interest return on your savings, you put up a dollar, you get a guarantee of $1 back, up
Mhm.
to $250,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not as good as a trust deed at $1.53 for a dollar. So how about a treasury bond, how much do you get for every dollar you put into a treasury bond?
Isn't it the same?
Yeah, it's not the same. So what you're promised with a treasury bond is the amount of the face of the note plus the interest at maturity date. So
Mm.
if it's a 10-year treasury note, you get the face value, and if the interest rate is, let's say, 5%, so you get 5% of the face value for all 10 years. So in 10 years, you would have basically doubled your money, about, no, half again as much. So you get $1.50 back after waiting 10 years. But that's your interest. That it's still dollar for dollar.
Mhm.
What about certificates of deposit? You put in $1. How much do you get back? What's your guarantee? Come here, come here, come here.
A dollar plus whatever the interest
Yeah,
rate is.
what's your interest? Yes, it's not the same. So all you get your dollar back. With the trust deed, you're getting $1.53 in collateral. If they go south on you, you have somewhere north of $1. You got 53 cents to spend on expenses to get your money back. Plus, you get your interest. So let's say, for example, because they're putting up the collateral, they don't pay you for month after month after month. Well, your 53%, you take your interest out of that. You have a right to use that 53%, 53 cents collateral to get paid out of the money that they owe you for your note. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. You borrowed, you owe me $100 a month. You didn't pay me for 6 months, you owe me $600. I foreclose, I sell the property, $600 I take off the top at the foreclosure sale and pay myself the interest I was owed, plus penalties, plus the cost to go through foreclosure, plus all that stuff. You have a right to collect it. Because generally speaking, even though I put up the collateral, generally speaking, you're only supposed to get $1 back because you put up $1. I mean, that's how we treat each other fair. But I'm willing to put up extra collateral in case I don't do what I'm promising, and promise you that out of that extra collateral, you can collect all the money you're owed. So it's kind of a nice scenario because if the Treasury goes out on their interest, you get no interest back on that Treasury note. If the bank goes out on their interest, do you get the interest back and you get your dollar back? It may be in your account already. They may have added it, so you might get it that way. But it's generally not the same kind of a deal. So I think it's a neat thing. Mutual funds have a similar thing. Stocks, you put in $1, who knows if you're going to get $1 back? You have no clue where it's going to go, up, down, sideways. Oh gosh, Gary, stocks average 6% per year for the life of the stock market. You're going to get 6%. Are you kidding me? I've seen that thing bounce all over the place. You may not get $1 back for the dollar you put in. Huge gamble. So anyway, it's just something that I think makes it makes this an interesting thing. And with the low loan to value, then that's your percentage. At 65%, you're getting a collateral put up against so that you can collect anything that you're owed off of that overage that they put there, because you'll get your dollar back, but then they're going to owe you interest and fees and all that. And then at 55%, it's a little more. I don't know what it is. I didn't do the math on it. The other thing that's interesting with this, if you use a professional company to create your documents, that uh, those companies have big insurance policies, lots of assets, and they get your paperwork right. You don't worry whether the documents that the title company, which only benefit the title company, by the way, you don't want to use their notes or any of their stuff because it's not set up to protect you as an investor, as well as a set of docs from a servicing company or a doc service that specifically works in this kind of deal. So you know that everything's properly executed by going through title and escrow. You'll have the right, make sure their signatures are right, it's the right people signing, get outside of all the fraud, all that kind of stuff. So that's really important to make sure that the title and the paperwork, the docs first is the next most important thing, and then the title having properly handled by an escrow agent and a servicing company. And then the next thing that you want to check and get yourself in line for is vetting the borrower, making sure that this person knows what they're doing, has enough experience, has an out that's going to be reasonable. It's going to make them, it's an exit plan that you can see as functional as it will work. And then I usually ask if that doesn't work, what else do you have? What's your second option for an exit plan? And so I try and get a second one out of them. And so those are my list of things that I would do to have a successful note investment, and kind of how I would order it. Now, do you have any questions for me on what we talked about today?
Have you ever had to foreclose on a business, like commercial loan before?
I haven't. I haven't had to do that. It's the
I've
same. It's the same.
been mostly in California, and I always hear that California is like the longest difficult foreclosure process. So I wanted to see if you had any experience with that.
Yeah, yeah. It's changed a little bit this year, but it's now. So what you said was judicial foreclosure, and if you're using that term, I would probably, in fact, I would agree with you that either New York or California would be some of the most difficult places to do a foreclosure in a judicial. But remember, this is a trust deed state and note secured by deed of trust, and that's a non-judicial foreclosure. So that gets back to the right paperwork being used in that state. So here, the foreclosure process stays out of the court, and the trustee operates it in the borrower grants the trustee the right to take the property back when when the terms of the note are not agreed. Up front, the borrower agrees to that. And so we don't have a judicial foreclosure process, and that tends to be somewhere between 121 days to about 180 days, something in that nature. So that's a great question. Um, but there's a difference between non-judicial and judicial. So keep that in mind. There are states that are only judicial, and that would be like Florida, Louisiana, those kinds of states. States with English common law as their base law, the base structure, tend to have the trust deed structure. At least that's how I understand it. Any other questions come to mind?
No, not at the moment.
Nothing to even think of. Well, if something comes up, you're more than welcome to give me a call or rattle my cage. Um,
How do you find both your investors and borrowers?
yeah, it's a great question. So yesterday, I'll give you an example of finding borrowers. So yesterday, I went to the auction on the courthouse steps and introduced myself to all the flippers and fixers who were buying houses at the auction that had been foreclosed on. And they were delighted to see somebody who wanted to help them invest in their business. So that was one way of finding borrowers. I have attorneys refer me customers. I have realtors refer me customers. I call contractors and ask them, are you fixing and flipping? Are you doing big projects where your homeowners need to borrow against their house? Do you ever have these needs? If you wouldn't be interested in me providing quick funding so you can get to work on a deal, would you? And they're like, oh yeah, I would be. So, I get their card and I will go through that. So it comes through that basis. I haven't had a lot of success with uh, using the internet as far as putting up videos and whatnot, but I suspect that won't come right away. I only started basically around the 9th of January this year doing the videos. I didn't know how to do them. I didn't know about Zoom. I didn't know YouTube. I didn't know CapCut. I didn't know Opus Clip. I didn't know. I just didn't know a lot. So I had a lot to learn. My personal experience in the beginning of my career, what newspapers were the way that you advertised and the yellow pages. So when you were starting a business, you would immediately call up the classified section of the newspaper and run a 3-line ad with your phone number saying what you did, and your phone would ring. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. Craigslist is the closest thing to that, which I do run an ad there. And now it's this different animal altogether. You know, I mean, the phones used to be hooked to the walls. I mean, everything's changed, and that's fine. I don't mind adapting. And the world's always, it's interesting that everything changes. At least you don't get bored with the same old thing for now 60 something years. So I do that, and then to find the investors, hopefully, I'll build relationships online here. But the way I do that is I go to the uh, database for the county of the property that I'm looking to finance the loan. And I look at all the people who have made a note, or the lenders, they're listed in the Hall of Records. So I'll pull their names, I'll create a spreadsheet, I'll research their name, their phone number, their email, and then I'll call them up and I'll say, hey, I've got this deal, it's this deal, it's a good rate of return, it's got a low loan to value, good borrower. You wouldn't be interested in investing in a deal like that, would you? And sometimes they'll say no, or, I already have my loan broker that I work with, or I do my own deals. And sometimes they say, yeah, I'd be interested. Well, let me get your email address. Is it this? And I already have it. Is this your email address? And they're like, yeah. Well, let me send it over to you. And I send them over a sheet, and I give them, once I pick the lender who's going to do the deal, I actually have a folder on Google Docs, Google Drive, that has everything I've collected on the borrower, all the appraisals, all the title paperwork, everything, so that they can research it and look at everything I've looked at. So, and then that gives them a chance to invest. And then, I have them put the money in the title company and we draw the docs. And so that's how I find them, is just that way. And then if they're good to work with, I'll call them first. If they're difficult to work with, you know, let's just be honest. We click with certain people and we don't click with other people. And I'm, not to say either one of us is right or wrong. We just don't click. So I just don't choose, when it's difficult. If it's easy, and then that's what I'm looking for. And they're looking for easy too. They want me to manage everything and take care of it. And I'm kind of like a property manager of notes. That's kind of what I do. So the investors want somebody who's going to deal with that. The ones who don't want that, who want to do your own investing, like you had mentioned, that's not a good fit. They're going to do their own thing. So they're going to do what you do. They're going to ask me, how do I find my borrowers? And I'm going to tell you, contractors, go to auctions, go to realtors, network at, wherever, and say, hey, I'm looking for you know, notes to create notes, and I want collateral from property, and I'm flexible in my terms. I can fund fast and get everything into the escrow and title, and you can get this handled and beyond your way. And you pick the deals, you learn, like what we've been talking about, 12 months to 36 months, certain interest rate in the note, you know, set it all up the way that's fair to both parties. Make sure that you put the prepayment on so that you get paid your interest in case they pay early, all those kinds of things.